Hi, everybody. My name is Steven, and I'm here to talk to you just a little bit about a book or an element that I just recently published with Cambridge University Press as part of their Elements line, which is designed to provide these sort of small introductions to different topics. And the particular strand that I've wrote this book on irony in is in the psycholinguistic strand. So there's a lot of psycholinguistic literature that I review, but I think that this is a book that can be of interest to anybody um, interested in learning more about verbal irony processing or the theories behind it. So here's just part of the blurb from the description of the book, which I don't necessarily want to read to you, but I just want to point out that it covers the definitions, theories, and psycholinguistic models of ironic language, which, as I've mentioned, can be applicable to many different treatments of irony. There's a lot of overlap between the psycholinguistic approaches and pragmatic linguistic and other approaches. And then also tackle some key questions. The big one is the distinction between literal and ironic meaning, which has driven so much of the research in this area, and whether or not it's a fruitful endeavor to continue with, and what we've learned from it. So here's a table of contents. As you can see, it's not overly long. It's 61 pages in total, so it's a nice intro into this topic and give you a good foundation. The book starts with a reversal of the common question to is it ironic? And this is where I deal with the question that many people have dealt with when writing about irony is how to define it. There's a lot of other existing books and resources that also deal with this, and I review them to just talk about the difficulties associated with defining irony, particularly in terms of being figurative language. I then turn to the psycholinguistic research, which was heavily driven by pragmatic theory and the distinction between literal and ironic meaning, and particularly looking at the models such as direct access and graded salience hypothesis, and the empirical evidence for them. I also review the parallel constraint satisfaction model here as a means to give balance to the different models, the different psycholinguistic models. I then go into what I call later psycholinguistic studies, which is when new methods come in. So people started using eye tracking, ERP, and other methods like that to ask some of the same questions as the early studies, but also starting to ask new questions, moving away from comparing maybe a literal versus an ironic use, but looking at some other additional features which might be influencing the way that people process and comprehend verbal irony. I then talk about what I said is ears and minds here, where we start getting into a lot of the neurolinguistic evidence and looking at additional contextual influences on irony, really moving away from the literal ironic divide, thinking about things like theory of mind and ironic tone of voice and how people rely upon these to recognize, process, and understand verbal irony. And then I have a section on future directions. This is where I reiterate some ways to move the field forward, particularly in terms of thinking about different questions besides an ironic versus a literal contrast, but also looking at things like multilingual irony processing, processing irony in a language that isn't your first, thinking about things like irony production, and talking about some of the new ways that researchers have developed to model ironic contexts, such as the RISC database by Rothermich et al., and thinking about different related constructs, such as something near and dear to my heart, looking at the psycholinguistic processing of satirical language. And again, a little bit preachy, talking about some of the ways we can move the field forward in terms of stepping away from this contrast between literal and ironic and starting to ask different questions about influences on verbal irony itself. So it's a relatively short read. I think it can be useful to people interested in psycholinguistics that don't know much about irony, or people who want to know more about some of the early irony theories and are interested in getting into some of the psycholinguistic research. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to shoot me an email or talk to me when you have a chance. All right, thanks.